Hello, everyone. Welcome. We will begin the presentation soon. We're seeing everyone that's coming in so far, and we're quite excited about that. So we're looking forward to this presentation. I hope everyone signed in. Of course, you're signed into your Hoover app. There's lots of great stuff happening on Hoover right now. I see quite a number of folks who are joining us. Please continue joining us. So we have about 3 minutes to allow others to join the presentation, and then we will get going. Just wanted to say welcome to everyone who's already on. And we already have questions in our question and answer. That is great. Continue to do so. Put some questions in the question and answer. We will get to them later. We have about 2 more minutes before we begin the presentation, and then I will introduce myself and everyone else. Quite a few people are joining us, so just keep on coming in. We are excited. Just keep on joining. This is truly exciting. Well, hello, everyone. I think we can get going now because it is that 7:30 hour. I am Suzanne Sobers, and I am the Director for Volunteer Engagement at the Marfan Foundation. And joining me behind the scene is my colleague, Bruno da Silva, and he will be posting in the chat box. So if you are on the chat box, Bruno will be able to direct you. We want to welcome you to this second week of the International E3 Summit, which is all about educating, empowering, and enriching our community. And it is brought to you by the Marfan Foundation and our division, the Louis-Steed Syndrome Foundation, the VEDS Movement, and our partners in Europe at PsyD. We want to thank you for making this a historic summit. It's truly one of the largest events that we have ever done. And actually, the slide is a little off because we have over 2,700 registered from more than 72 countries. So we are excited about that. And not only did you come from various countries all over the world, but you also represent several different conditions. And you can see that from the slide, we have everything that's represented, including our key conditions. And we're also thrilled that more than 300 medical professionals have joining us so that they can hear from the leading experts in these various fields. We want to thank our sponsors, who it's Brigham and Women's Hospital and American Communication Construction. Before we start the presentation, just a little housekeeping that we wanted you to know. The International Summit is a forum to provide an open discussion of issues related to genetic, aortic, and vascular conditions. And the opinions that are stated by our speakers are not necessarily those of the Marfan Foundation or PsyD. So if you hear different opinions from our speakers and want further clarification, please contact our help desk at marfan.org/E3S. We ask that you be patient since the volume of questions to that website is going to be a little high. But we promise to get back to you as quickly as possible. Today, we are fortunate to have Dr. Melissa Flint present, and you're going to hear from her when she presents on inner peace through self-compassion. And I have to tell you, it's an amazing presentation. But before we move on to the presentation, I'd like to remind you that we need your feedback for the sessions. So you can start, you will see we're highlighting where you can rate the session. And at the end of the session, there'll also be a survey. We ask that you fill out the survey questions. Your feedback is so important as we build new programs for the future, and we want it to be applicable to you. So please, again, rate the session at the end and fill out the survey questions. And following the presentation, there'll be plenty of time for your questions. So please put them in the Q&A, and it's also on your app, and we will do our best to answer as many of the questions as we can. So now, without further ado, we are going to run the presentation by Dr. Flint, and we will get back at the other end to do the question and answer. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Melissa Flint. I'm so glad to be with you today and just talking for a little bit of time about something really important for all of us. And I kind of had to giggle as I was preparing this for you and recognizing that I needed it as much for myself as I did want to share with all of you. So thanks so much in the midst of all the busyness of the summit that you took time to come in and just at least even think about this idea of inner peace and self-compassion, because it is a really important part of our lives that we often let go by the wayside. So the first slide here talks a little bit about a meme or, pictogram that was sent forward to me in Facebook one day. And I kind of looked at it and I said, oh, isn't that nice? And in preparing for this, I said, oh, that's really nice and exactly what we're talking about. Self-compassion is simply giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would give to others. And isn't it ironic that we are our own worst enemies? That we would never dare say things to other people that we say to ourselves in our head, sometimes even verbally. And that is the opposite of self-compassion. It's self-harm, in fact, in a way, when we are as awful to ourselves as we are at times. So this is a great reminder that self-compassion isn't this big, esoteric, weird idea. It's really just about being and giving the same kindness to ourselves that we would try to give to others. And that's an important starting point for us to even think about. There's 3 elements of self-compassion. The first one starts with mindfulness. And I think sometimes mindfulness, it feels like it's kind of overused, overdone. But we're tough to convince, us people. We have hard heads. And sometimes the idea that one suggests that you just be mindful and be more aware seems so rudimentary, but so impossible at the same time. So self-compassion really starts with being mindful, understanding that I make mistakes, that everyone makes mistakes, that my value is not solely derived from my work or my parenting or my, whatever else I have going on in my life. The second element of self-compassion is actually asking us to be gentle. And again, another really difficult thing, especially when we're going through a really hard time. It is hard for us to be gentle and focus on what we can learn from mistakes and understand that because everyone makes mistakes, we're mindful of that we need to respond to ourselves with gentleness. What am I going to learn from this? Maybe I'm not going to repeat it because it was a big mistake, but there's still learning that's happened. So that's the second element of self-compassion. And the third one might be the hardest because honestly, it's hard to be honest with ourselves at times. And so the third element is being honest and evaluating ourselves with honesty. And this also means not applying a different set of rules for ourselves than we are applying for everybody else, which again goes into that kind of self-talk that we do. If you guys think just in the last couple of days, different things that have crossed your mind about yourself. They probably weren't gentle. They probably weren't very honest. It was just your negative thinking that was really taking over your ability to be honest in a self-compassionate way. So we're going to talk about some really specific ways that we might be able to do that. So how do I achieve self-compassion? What can I do? And like this little picture says, the true goal of self-improvement is not perfection, but to be better than we were before. Isn't that the basis from which self-compassion really grows from? If I want to achieve self-compassion and be compassionate to myself in my thinking, in my words, in my being, I need to be my own best friend. I need to develop beliefs that are going to work for me. And this is the hard part, because often we've been given beliefs, but we really don't. They don't resound with us. They don't reside with us. They're not congruent with what we really believe. So, for example, I adopted the religion of my family growing up. They were Lutheran. I was Lutheran. And it wasn't until I was about, 16 or 17, and I went, wait a minute. This isn't congruent with my core beliefs. And so I had to be forced with a decision. Am I going to be incongruent and continue on that path, or am I going to make a change and be more congruent? So the very first step is to identify your core beliefs. What's important to you? Are you acting congruently with them? If the answer is no, then how do we make those line up with one another? The second point under this develop beliefs that work for you section that I want to make sure that we cover is that we have the ability to replace dysfunctional beliefs with ones that work for us. We do not need to carry the message of our abusive parent with us the rest of our lives. We do not need to believe that teacher that told us at that one point that we were stupid because we had made a mistake. We don't need to continue with those dysfunctional beliefs that are not true, honest, or compassionate. But yet we remember those and use those with much more force than we use the compassionate ones. So we have the ability to replace these dysfunctional beliefs, which is so important. We also recognize that you have the ability to change your beliefs and perspectives to respond to difficult situations. And just by virtue of you all being at this summit, you have been involved in difficult situations. From diagnoses to not maybe being listened to in your symptoms, to surgeries, to life changes, to all sorts of different things. And, somebody once told me, you make me angry. And I thought, as a psychologist, well, I wish I had that much power. The fact of the matter is that nobody can make us anything. We accept that and kind of fuel that fire. So if I know that I can change my beliefs even in difficult situations and have more gratitude, look on the bright side, take the positives and leave the negatives, all those kind of things, it helps me be in better control, and it also helps me be self-compassionate. A question at the end here is this a habit or a fear of change that keeps you holding on to that negativity? Because even though it's uncomfortable, if that's what you've grown up with and that's what you've practiced for 20, 30, 40, 60, 80 years of your life, it's hard to think about letting that go. And that might be actually scary, too scary, in fact. So it could be a habit or a fear of change that is actually keeping you and holding you back from changing those negative stances that are definitely not self-compassionate. The next slide, we're just going to talk about more ways to achieve self-compassion. And one of those ways is frankly just knowing that you are inherently worthy. Just because you are worthy. So many of us hold beliefs, maybe from years of abuse or not being listened to or trauma or just poor relationships and bad communication. We hold on to this belief that we have to prove our worth. And guess what? Because you are here on this earth, you are inherently worthy. I want you to think about some of these things. The bad treatment that you received from your parents or caregivers or whoever those people might have been during your formative years was an example of their unhappiness and not a reflection of your worth. We need to start separating that out. That's self-compassion. We need to forgive ourselves for past mistakes. We can choose to beat ourselves up, which is what we often do because we're really good at that. Brene Brown talks all about this all the time. Just we're our worst people to ourselves and beating ourselves up. So we can choose to focus our energy on that, the act of beating ourselves up, or choose to focus our energy on being the best that we can be, which is definitely the self-compassionate component. Putting others down, judging others undermines your self-worth. So if you're a person that inherently kind of immediately jumps to judging or jumps to putting other people down as a part of your coping mechanisms, you're hurting yourself. And so I kind of put in here a little colloquial, knock that off. But we all need to have reminders to knock that off, because when we're frustrated or flustered or anxious, maybe you're COVID anxious right now on top of the regular anxiety you might carry, we can lash out at people often that are even the closest ones to us. So know that when you put others down or judge others, you're actually undermining your own self-worth, not self-compassionate. And then the last one on here, stop the negative self-comparisons to others. If we constantly compare ourselves to the photoshopped, wonderful, beautiful lives that are presented on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever, all TikTok and all these other social media forums are, it's not any surprise that so many people have self-image issues, because we have this idea of perfection, which doesn't actually exist. It's airbrushed oftentimes. And so stopping that negative self-comparison is self-compassionate. And Kristen Neff, who's a researcher in this area, if you look her up and look up self-compassion, you will find millions of pieces of information that comes out of her research. And I love this idea that she put out. Unlike self-criticism, which asks if you're good enough, self-compassion asks what's good for you. What a completely different way of looking at our world, especially when we're stressed and maybe in one of those more depressed ruts that we can get into when we are being our own worst enemy. Some more things we can do to achieve self-compassion. Don't project your needs onto others. This might be a really hard one, especially when there are times when we're ill that we need others. And then there's times where we're doing a bit better and maybe we don't, but those lines can get pretty blurred. When we need others to meet all of our needs, we're almost always going to be left feeling hurt, angry, empty, because they don't have a crystal ball. They don't know exactly what those needs are. And so inherently, they will fail us. And so I've really had to do personal work in this area. Why don't people just know what I need? And that's a pretty unrealistic expectation. So I wanted to develop more realistic expectations of my relationships. It's not the responsibility of others to make you happy. It's my responsibility to make me happy. Even in those times that seem the darkest, how can I still find some light? We need to reinvest the energy that we spend trying to get others to meet our needs and then still feeling failed on our own self-care. That is self-compassion. And just another idea about this over in the picture, feeling compassion for ourselves in no way releases us from responsibility for our actions. Rather, it releases us from the self-hatred that prevents us from responding to our life with clarity and balance. Self-compassion is about balance. It's about being clear about your morals and your ideas about the world and being congruent with those, like we talked about on that very first slide. Something else we can do is give yourself the gift of happiness and peace of mind. Believe that happiness is your inherent right and not something that you have to earn. When you're experiencing those intense emotions, maybe after a traumatic event or a difficult doctor's appointment or, bad news that we all can receive just as part of life, accept those feelings, don't judge them, just honor what they are and focus on, in that moment, being self-compassionate. Don't beat yourself up. I shouldn't feel that. I couldn't, I wouldn't. All those things are very hard psychologically on our psyche, but we do them all the time. Remember, too, that stress does not equate your worth or value. So there's no need to flaunt your stressors. Everyone has their own burden. Focus instead on how you're going to change rather than how you're going to share. And this one might be a little bit of a sting as people listen to this, because it's very easy for us to go on social media in particular and wear the badge of exhaustion, wear the badge of stress. And somehow that makes people feel sorry for us, or makes people think that we're superheroes, or who knows what the outcome is. But I know that when I focus on sharing stress, I only feel more stressed. Brene Brown says, I no longer wear exhaustion as a badge of honor. And that can be said for, I no longer wear stress as a badge of honor. That we need to be able to be self-compassionate and let some of those things go, because it's very important that we do so for our own self-compassion, for our own mental health. Another way to be more self-compassionate is to take great care of yourself. Not just okay, not just good, but take great care of yourself. What makes you happy? What brings you joy? What might your world look like if you prioritize your needs and the things that brought joy into your life? I bet our lives would all look a little bit different. We've been taught as a society, too, that it's selfish to do self-care and have self-compassion, and it's exactly the opposite. Know that it is not selfish to take care of yourself. And another thing to kind of fit on this side was elimination of some of those self-destructive behaviors. If you know that you need to be doing X, Y, and Z to care for your medical condition, but yet you choose to do A, B, and C instead, there might be a little bit of it's disjointed there. It's a little bit separate from what your goals and needs are. There's many self-destructive behaviors that we do, fighting in our families, alcohol use, drug use, things that we think might make us feel better when we're depressed, when in fact are actually more depressants that we add into our system. So thinking about those self-destructive behaviors, and they could be anything. It could be different for each person listening, but that's something to also consider. Even Buddha talked about compassion, self-compassion. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Absolutely. Take care of yourself. You are part of this picture. And then Rudy Francisco, perhaps we should love ourselves so fiercely that when others see us, they know exactly how it should be done. Wow. If I can love myself so much that it exudes from me, not in a narcissistic, weird kind of way, but just in I'm whole, I'm worthy, I deserve compassion kind of way, you also give those things to others, and they will know how to treat you by the way you're treating yourself. And those things become much more in line and much more congruent. So I also love that saying. Again, I told you when I was putting this together, it was almost more for me than for all of you. I'm working on these things. Eliminate negative reactions whenever possible. This is a hard one. Recognize that no one can make you mad except yourself. You accept that and then you run with it. We're great at that. My daughter was irritating the heck out of me the other day, just kind of popping her head in 50 times. She's doing high school right now. And at one point I responded and I snapped back at her and I said, don't you know I'm working? And she looked at me with those puppy dog eyes, and I realized in that moment, all she was trying to do was gain connection. She wasn't trying to make me mad. I allowed myself to get mad, and then I had to allow myself to go apologize because that was the right thing to do. Know that your choice to be calm or to remain focused rather than emotionally reactive, sorry about that typo there, remain focused, rather than being this emotional wreck, does not mean you're a follower, does not mean you're powerless. It's exactly the opposite. In fact, you're taking your power back. You're not allowing, so to speak, other people to do things to you. You are gaining your strength and choosing to deal with things with a self-compassionate framework. Kristen Neff, another quote from her. So why is self-compassion a more effective motivator than self-criticism? Because its driving force is love, not fear. Those are big pieces. We do so much in response to fear or wanting to look good or wanting to be judged as worthy. And all of those things we are inherently already, because we are humans and we exist and we have the capacity for those things. This is all the core of self-compassion. Just a couple more slides and then we'll wrap up before we go to Q&A. Appreciate what you have. This is a big piece of it. Your problem is you're too busy holding on to your unworthiness, is the quote along the side there. And gosh, we hold on to our unworthiness much more than we hold on to our worthiness. I need to appreciate what I have, know that I'm worthy. see that we impair our own happiness when we're always waiting for something bigger or better, if we can't see the beauty in every moment, to slow down and again be mindful, value and savor all you have in your life, and live with a sense of abundance rather than scarcity. Oh my gosh, this one hit me right in kind of the middle of my forehead as I was typing this in, because I, especially in this time of COVID, scarcity, lack of, but also scared, was very much connected to this as I was typing, because many people right now are living scared. And in that, how can we have abundance? How can we have happiness unless we actively change our minds to focus on some of those things? Now, focusing on happiness does not mean you forget all the bad, because there's good and bad. It just means you're putting your energy where you can get the most output. And that is with things like self-compassion, practicing gratitude. This has become a part of my everyday life. I need to remind myself every day to be grateful, because I am so easily led astray by the negativity and the TV reports and the COVID reports and all these crazy things that are coming across our screens constantly at us. Gratitude helps me to slow down and find the bits of peace, P-E-A-C-E, the pieces of peace, so to say, in each thing that I'm seeing and bringing into my space. And just the last slide, just some last ideas about how can I achieve this idea of self-compassion. Figure out how you can enjoy the present moment. Maybe that's a regular meditation or prayer practice where you get to that place of just for a few minutes of having a sense of inner peace. Whenever you're caught up in worry, ask yourself if there's something that you can do about it. If there's not, let it go. If there is, do it. There's action there. There's power there. And just one last note from Kristen Neff, which I just love. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion I need. And this is a decision that we need to make to impart a self-compassion practice into our life, because it's not going to happen naturally for many of us, especially if you tend to look at things a little bit more negatively, kind of see the glass half empty instead of the glass half full. But that doesn't mean that we can't be really successful in having this be a part of our health versus a part of a mental health need, if we learn how to be self-compassionate to ourselves. So hopefully I've given us a bit to talk about in the next few minutes. And again, I just want to let you know that I'm so thankful that you took the time. My gratitude jar is going to include you all today, in that we could just take some time to share and maybe get some really real world ideas and some accountability about how we do the work we do.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That presentation was so insightful. I believe it also spoke to me. I may have mentioned this to you before, and I'm certain it also spoke to everyone who is online. Very thorough, very insightful. So we're going to take some of the questions now. And so one of the first questions that we have in the chat is, how often do people try to bring you down even though they don't know you?
Oh gosh, let me count the ways. You know, this is a big issue, and I think it's become even bigger because we're so over-connected. We're connected via Facebook and Insta this and instant that and happy this, sad, I mean, the phone, the text, the messages, and we are more connected with people who don't really know us. Maybe they're acquaintances or just people, you know, that have the same interests on Facebook. The thing, people in general who aren't kind of doing their own self-work often look to breaking down others to make themselves feel better. And it's awful and it's ugly and it's not attractive and it's just mean sometimes, but we do it almost unconsciously because society has kind of trained us to do that. Mm-hmm. There's another piece to this though too. I think that if the general you, whoever's doing this, can feel empowered by maybe belittling your situation or telling you, you know, just kind of bringing you down, in their attempt to lift themselves up, it's a false lift, isn't it? It's not authentic. It's not congruent. It's not going to make them peaceful or happy, and it hurts you. So we really need to work on this as a society together. One thing that COVID has brought me clarity with in regard to this is that I was way too overconnected. And I don't need to care what 400 followers on Facebook think. I know who my inner circle is, and I've actually started weeding out some of the people who do this kind of, maybe it's unintentional, I don't know, but they just bring others down in the way they respond and not being supportive. And sometimes we're just complaining and we just need somebody to say, gosh, that was really hard. I'm with you, instead of giving us the 10 things they would do. And why hadn't you thought about that already, right? So I've started purging. I've honestly started purging. I get to decide what I bring into my space. And once I realized that, I felt so much less victimized by the crazy that I was seeing and the people bringing me down that I don't know who Bob is. Okay, mute. I don't, it's why am I spending the night awake wondering why that person said that or thought that? I can actually change that. So that was a very long answer. So sorry about kind of rambling there, but
I think it was a very concise and precise answer. You're right. You have the power to turn Bob off. So that's great. Here's another great question. How can you learn to not fear change? They say the only thing we can count on in life is change, and it's not always good when you have a chronic illness.
Yeah. It is not always good, especially in the situation that so many of you guys find yourselves in, and so many of us in general find ourselves in. I think for me, fearing change was ingrained. It's how I always responded. And once I started thinking about it, I needed not to fear every change. And it was a decision. I actually had to sit there and go, okay, I'm feeling anxiety, that mindfulness. What has happened? Okay, it's a change thing. Is this change congruent with my values? Then I'm gonna, even though I'm a little scared, I'm gonna follow through with it. If that change is incongruent with my values, I try and tease out why. Is it the people involved? Is it that I'm not feeling heard or supported? Is the change just scary and I feel like I kind of need to take a blind jump of faith, which is really hard for a lot of people. That mindfulness, kind of teasing out what about it is actually making you fear. And a related thing that I just wanted to throw in is that many of us respond outwardly in anger when we're actually afraid. We attack the people closest to us when we're afraid. And in situations that we're looking at needing to change, oftentimes we are hardest on the people that are the best supporters of us. So mindfully being aware of that during times of change. And then the gratitude piece falls into this too. Some of the biggest things in my life that have been changes, I'll throw one out, the death of my son when I was in graduate school. Talk about a change. Everything changed in a second. For many years, I could not find anything about that to be grateful for. Now, years later, he was my greatest teacher. He taught me to be compassionate. He taught me to love people. And so even though that change was really hard, I know now that I have the capacity to be an even better person because he was in my world and he was in my life and continues to be, even not in his physical presence. So I hope that example makes a little bit of sense, but that's a hard one. Fearing change is very natural. It's very organic. So start dissecting what you're actually afraid of. And sometimes it's a move we shouldn't make. Other times it's a move we need to make with faith.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Melissa. Oh, and my heart goes out to you by just even sharing your own personal story. How can you take that first step in a major change that is needed in your life? That first step.
That first step is brutal sometimes. We stew about it. We lose sleep over it. What's the worst that can happen when we take that step? We realize it wasn't the right step and we change course. There's a saying, I want to say it's a Hindu proverb, probably. I might be wrong about that, but there's many paths up the same mountain and you get to the same place. So in these first steps, take them and evaluate. How am I feeling emotionally? Especially don't leave that emotional part out. Does it make sense physically? Do I have the right team? Is my family on board or not? Yes or no? You know, all those pieces we can kind of dissect, but really the first step kind of comes down to a moment where you say, take a deep breath and go, okay, I'm just going to step. The worst that's going to happen is I have to step back and readjust my course. So hopefully we can kind of get past that. It's sometimes easier to fear and never do anything than to actually try it out and then admit that it was wrong.
Mhm.
So again, self-compassion, just do over, plot twist.
Yes. Okay. There are now many stimuli for grounding and happiness. Which is better, cannabis, Neuralink, EBS? There's some words I'm not sure what it means, but EBS, VR, or optimal sexual health?
Well, I suppose anybody who has a great sex life has some happiness. So I'm not quite sure whether at the end of that question what the writer was looking for. But here's a couple thoughts. Again, I don't know exactly. EBS stands for so many different things. I don't want to take it out of context. Virtual reality, I think, is what the VR stands for in that. You know, so many people look for something outside of them to help make them happy. I guess my charge today is, can we use the stuff that we have inside of us to make us happy and not need cannabis, not need virtual reality? Virtual reality is just that, it's virtual. It's not real life. And if I can't cope with real life, then that's just a momentary escape. And sometimes we need those momentary escapes. Don't get me wrong. I also get a little bit worried, and I am not a cannabis expert. I'm not a neuropharmacologist by any means, but I do get a little bit concerned about us kind of antagonizing neurotransmitters in our brains at random intervals on top of maybe medications we're already taking, on top of maybe antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. Yeah, it can make people feel happy, but you know, my patients who use alcohol as their drug of choice report that it makes them feel very happy for a few minutes, and then there's kind of a downhill turn from there. So that's a really big question, and if you're wanting to search for something kind of outside, that's something to definitely do with your providers. But I would encourage you, what can you do with what you already have in yourself? That self-compassion, the mindfulness, awareness, not allowing anybody to have the power to make you anything like we talked about in the presentation. That's where I'd like people to start going, first of all, because there's no side effects from that.
Yes.
It's just you, and you always have you. You don't need to wait till you can get the cannabis, or wait till you have the virtual reality, or wait till you have your partner to have intimate relationships. So maybe bring it back and focus on what you have inherently and see how effective that can be for you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Melissa. Here's another great one. This person writes, when I make mistakes at work, I feel so upset with myself and obsess about it. How do I fix those negative, obsessive feelings?
Again, so easy, right? Because we are so easily reminded. It's almost like the film of the negative goes through our head, and then we have a little pop of whatever happened positive, but this reel is always going. So to interrupt that reel, it's a very specific decision. When you feel yourself doing it, use a stop technique. And there's many different stop techniques, but literally some of my patients and myself, I literally go, okay, stop. I see what's going on. Let me stop that momentum. If you are a chronic worrier, that's something definitely that maybe some individual work and therapy might help. But some other ideas are, it sounds silly, but a worry jar. When I'm really worrying about things, I'm going to write them down. I'm going to put them in the jar, because it's almost like we fear we're going to forget that we were worried about it, but we can't stop worrying about it. So it's a very ironic process. I write it down, I put it in my worry jar. And I have an hour or so in the afternoon or evening. If I want to go visit the worry jar and ruminate on all those things, I sure do. And when that hour's up, I stop, because that worry is inhibiting my family time. It's inhibiting my ability to do my work. It's inhibiting my self-esteem, my self-worth. But that chronic worry, if you can't turn it off, it's a little bit more than just maybe mindfulness might be able to help. So I'd really encourage you, sounds like maybe talking to somebody might be a great option for you to really work through that anxiety that's behind the worry.
Okay. All right, wonderful. We had a question that was along the same lines, but I think you may have answered it, but I'll
Okay.
just shoot it at you. You talked about replacing dysfunctional behavior and we play them back in our heads. Can you point out a technique to stop the tape or stop the habit? And I think that's what you meant
Hmm.
before. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
move on to the next one that says, how do I cope better with people in my world who are users or manipulate me?
Oh,
How
yeah.
do I deal with those sort of people better?
Okay. So part of self-compassion is identifying the people in our environment that are helpful and hurtful. And that's a tough conversation to have with yourself because sometimes the most hurtful people are the ones that we feel like we need to have close. Maybe it's a parent or a sibling or a boss or a best friend. It's not just as easy as, oh, just cut them out of your life, clearly, because you have connections and there's other needs that are met. But gosh, when people are manipulative and use you, I look at relationships and evaluate them like this. There are times where I need you to give to me to fill me up, as if we had two cups, fill me up. And then there's times that I reciprocally need to fill you up. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm the only one doing the filling in the relationship, my vessel is empty and I can't do anything for you, for me, for my kid, for anybody effectively. And so users, and I think that's kind of the person that you were thinking about, tend to make us empty our vessel or make us, there we go. I allow my vessel to be emptied because I keep pouring and never get anything reciprocally back. Some of those relationships you might consider still having in your life. A lot of them, I've kind of come to the point in my life, and maybe it's age or whatever, that I take those people in very small doses. I very much limit my time. I have changed holiday plans sometime depending on who's going to be there because the most powerful thing I have is my space and what I choose to bring into it. And if I allow people who chronically manipulate me in that space, there's never a win in that. There's not a win for them and there's not a win for you. And you end up feeling abused. And there are many times where we need to in our lives say, I'm not going to be abused in that way anymore. And we need to stand our ground. It's it's easier for me to say the words. I clearly understand that. And I companion so many of my clients through that exact same issue.
Mm-hmm.
Know that you have the power to decide who's in your space. And if they're chronically doing those things, they either don't know or they don't care. So if you converse with them and have the tough conversation and they still act that way, then it's because they don't care. If it's because they don't know and aren't aware, then they're going to change their behavior.
Okay, great. Someone writes, I love the idea of redirecting my energy for self-care and not waiting for others to do it for me. Can you elaborate on that?
I was always taught societally in my family that doing things for yourself was selfish, especially as a mother, as a parent, you do for everyone else and you're kind of last. I had to hit a rock bottom with some medical stuff and just health stuff and family stuff and realize that if I'm not strong and compassionate and able to be on solid footing for whatever reason, I can't do what I need to do for everyone else. So it's not selfish at all. In fact, it helps me be better for those people in my life. So that idea of pouring into yourself, it could be something really little, a massage, it could be a pedicure, it could be time to read your book, whatever brings you joy. And I think that's a very funny conversation. I just did an in-service at my university for the faculty, and I asked the audience what brings them joy. And over half the audience sat there and had to think about what was joyful in their lives. We're so busy doing all the stuff, but we're not busy doing anything that brings us joy. So maybe I'd even start there. What brings you joy? What feeds your soul? Is it prayer? Is it knitting? Is it watching the clouds? Is it seeing a sunset? And then incorporating those things slowly. This doesn't need to be a 360-degree change overnight. That rarely works for any of us. But inserting small pieces at a time help us get going and get the momentum. And then we see the positive outcome in all of our relationships when we do it.
Okay, lovely. Okay, so here's another great one. You talked about forgiving yourself for mistakes, like putting others down. Do you suggest apologizing to these people in person, or how do I go about making it right?
So if I know that I've either intentionally or unintentionally, just face it, we have some of both, have done something that has maybe been harmful or mean to somebody else, I do try and go and just say, hey, I was reflecting on that conversation we had last week. And I wonder if it came across this way. And I'm sorry if it did, and make amends. Some people that's too forceful. So there's lots of other ways. A quick little note if you don't want to do it verbally. Old fashioned snail mail card. I mean, just send it in the mail. It will take a little bit right now, but having a person just be acknowledged that you might have hurt them or you might have done something allows them to see that you love them, that you care for them, and also kind of builds that bridge that might have been destroyed a little bit back up between the two of you. So I do encourage myself and my patients to do some sort of amends. Now, if that person is gone, you can still do amends. Um, Even verbalizing it and putting it out in the world. For example, my grandfather's been gone for a few years, and we had a few kind of contentious conversations. And after his death, I had to come to a point where I sat on a bench outside and I was just like, Grandpa, dude, I'm sorry. And have that conversation because it was about me giving light and air to something that I was carrying that was almost like a cancer. It
Mhm.
was beating me down, and it might seem silly or not something that would be fruitful for people, but just verbalizing it, getting it out, making amends, even if it's somebody who's not here to receive that, you've still made the effort, and that's what our soul responds to as people. So
Great. Here's a really good one, and I think it's probably applicable to a lot of us. The person says, you talked about flaunting our stressors, but I am a super mom, and that's very hard for me to not let everyone know how hard I work.
mhm. So
I
I
do.
would start with asking yourself, why is it important that other people know how hard I work? What am I getting from that? Is there, if it's working and it's not causing you harm, then we maybe don't need to tweak that as much. But for most people, it does cause harm inadvertently because people start to shy away from us when they think that everything's going right in life and there's no acknowledgement that sometimes there's hiccups. You become an unreal person. You become like a Stepford person. Everything looks great, and then they're sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, I fed my kids cereal for dinner. This person, did a 7-course meal on a Monday night." It's that comparison again. So we are actually hurting others when we hold our stress as a badge of honor, and it doesn't do us any good as well because there's always moments we need to accept that we also need assistance, and we might need just somebody to cheer us on. So I think there's a way to balance conveying how busy and what a super mom you are, but also saying, you know what, I had a non-super mom moment today, and it was this, and being really honest, because in honesty, we can companion one another. When we're putting on a facade constantly, we can't companion one another and truly be there for each other.
Great. Another great question here. Does past trauma tend to make you less self-compassionate?
Yes, 1000% yes. For many people who have had trauma, one of the first questions, or the question that they ponder the most, is what did I do that I deserved X? And in one of those slides, I said something to the effect that, the relationship that we had with abusive others in our life is a reflection of their unhappiness and not a reflection of your worth is so important. It's a core part of trauma work that we really need to work on, is letting go of that idea that somehow I'm unworthy because I did something. In our traumas, 99.9% of the time, it had nothing to do with us and everything to do with the victimizer. A second part of that is when we have a history of trauma, do you see yourself as a victim or a survivor? Because those are two very different mindsets. If I'm a victim, I'm always looking at that relationship and what they did. As a survivor, I can separate a little bit and be my best in spite of, be my best because of, be my best. It's a really kind of a mind shift from being that victim in trauma to be a survivor of trauma. So that's another little component that tweak might help release some of that power that trauma still has over us. But yes, trauma makes us so much less self-compassionate. So those of us who have had trauma, we need to work even harder to be self-compassionate because it's not a natural conduit that it has been exercised as we've grown up.
Yes, okay. And I think this may be our last question. It says you spoke about no one can make you mad. What are some of the tricks to help control that emotion when I feel myself losing grip?
Yeah, it's kind of on a continuum, isn't it? From being fully in control to fully out of control. And for many years, I never caught myself until I was like 1 millimeter from fully out of control. So the first thing is that mindfulness and being aware. When I start feeling that well up, I stop and I ask myself the question, why am I angry right now? Why am I getting mad? Why am I sad? Whatever the feeling is. And I try and assess what that is, because then I can assess responsibility in that. Nope, that saying, not my circus, not my monkeys, I use a lot because I was taking responsibility and being angry about things that were not in my circus and they were not my monkeys. And that allows me to separate a little bit and not slide down to that point where I'm almost out of control or actually out of control. I think we've all had those moments where we've just lost it and we've screamed or shouted or I remember a time, don't tell anybody, a couple weeks ago, just literally a couple weeks ago. So I am working on this with y'all. That I just lost it. And I was making up swear words, you guys. They didn't even exist. I was just making them up. Now, I clearly missed all of the triggers and went straight to, you've lost it, girl. I had to go back and apologize. I had to pull that back. I had to reassess after the fact. If I can slow it down, though, when it's over here, that's really the key. Okay, this should be making, there's nothing I can do about this. I'm not going to take control over this. I'm in this moment. This is not my main worry. I'm going to put this on the shelf until later. Whatever it is to kind of stop that momentum from going all the way to losing control is what helps us be most effective in stopping that cycle when we can. We're not going to be perfect. 2 weeks ago, you guys, I mean, this happens to all of us. Self-compassion. All right, Flint, you're going to try not to have it happen again. That's the self-compassion part of this.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Again, it shows that you're also human as we're all dealing with issues and the importance of this self-compassion. So that's the last in our queue right now that I've seen. But, to everyone who is tuned in, if you have any questions in the future surrounding that, you can always submit them to us through our website at marfan.org/E3S. Again, be patient with us because the volume of questions that we're getting for the summit is pretty high at this point. But we promise that our Help and Resource Center will get back to you with your questions being answered. We're manipulating the slides just a little bit, so please bear with us. Here we go. We again remind you to give us feedback for the session. It is so important that you fill out the survey and also rate the session on your Hoover app. And we encourage you to please visit our exhibitors in the virtual exhibit hall. We want you to also connect with others in the community through the app. There are many meetups. We encourage you to take advantage of them. And also there are a lot of other sessions that are coming up for this week into next week. Please go and share that information so others can join you. If you are on social media, we ask that you share your experience at #E3Summit20. And finally, we want to continue to provide you with great programming. So if there is, you have the ability to make a donation to the foundation for this life-saving work that we do, please go to marfan.org/donate to do so. I want to thank Dr. Flynn for all that we've learned from her tonight. We appreciate you sharing your time and expertise. And if you have any final comments that you want to make, I welcome you to do that now, Dr. Flynn.
You know, I just wanted to let all of the listeners know that I just see you as all superheroes in your own right. You struggle and go through so much, and yet here you are attending a summit, learning more every day, trying to make yourself better and more complete despite whatever's going on individually. And I've learned so much from all of you, and I just appreciate your honesty in being here and even acknowledging this topic tonight. So keep up the good work, and each one of you are valuable just because you are. Please remember that.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Dr. Flynn. And to all our participants, we want to wish you well wherever you are in the world. Have a great morning, great afternoon, or great evening. Make it a great day. So we thank you again for participating, and we look forward to seeing you at another session. Bye now.